penguins are social animals. In the cold Arctic, they always move in flocks, whether migrating, hunting, or raising their young. However, at a certain special time, there is occasionally a penguin in the flock that stops moving forward with the group when it suddenly looks toward the distant mountains. It gazes at the snow-capped mountains in the distance, and after a long silence, suddenly leaves its flock. It abandons the path leading to a more suitable habitat and heads toward the distant snow-capped mountains. The snow-capped mountains in the distance are faintly visible, seeming close but actually very far away. The penguin heading toward the snow-capped mountains cannot find food, and this behavior is equivalent to suicide. But every penguin that chooses to leave the group and rush toward the snow-capped mountains does so without hesitation and never looks back. Until it dies on the way. People always have a moment of sudden self-awareness. At that moment, they may not be mature or rational enough to act on a simple ideal. But at least they live a carefree and unrestrained life. Just like Zhang Yi at this moment. He had a rare moment of impulse, willing to give up the opportunity to obtain a large amount of supplies and form an unbreakable feud with the Northwest King Li Changgong. He wanted to slap Li Changgong in the face so that Li Changgong would know that his proud background and self-righteousness were insignificant and worthless in Zhang Yi's eyes. Zhang Yi closed the communication channel with Li Changgong. There was nothing left to talk about. Li Changgong's plea for peace proved one thing: he was about to give up. Zhang Yi finally raised the two guns in his hands and aimed at Li Changgong, who was standing on the ground, his face full of shock but still trying to maintain his ridiculous dignity. Starfall. From the muzzle of his gun, a torrent of black bullets spurted out, like one brilliant black meteor after another, heading straight for Li Changgong. Zhang Yi didn't even need to aim, as every bullet was locked onto Li Changgong's location. In an instant, thousands, even tens of thousands of bullets made of void energy struck the ground. Li Changgong's pupils suddenly contracted. He knew that Zhang Yi was about to finish him off. However, Li Changgong was not going to admit defeat so easily. Zhang Yi, you're not worthy of defeating me. Li Changgong roared in anger, raised his swords, and slashed at the sky, cutting down one star after another. However, the stars that were cut down did not disappear, but crashed to the ground with a loud bang. Each dark star formed an incomparably huge pit on the ground. In just a short time, the area within a radius of nearly 10,000 meters around Li Changgong had turned into a huge valley. Torrential rain poured down without stopping for a moment, and there was no shortage of dark clouds in the sky, so the natural phenomena became Zhang Yi's weapon. Li Changgong rushed left and right, struggling to defend himself against Zhang Yi's endless attacks. He suddenly discovered something. While fighting him, Zhang Yi was still able to stuff things into his mouth. Those were the supernatural foods that Yang Xia had obtained after leveling up, which allowed Zhang Yi to recover his supernatural abilities at the fastest speed. But Li Changgong didn't have such privileges. Even though he had some medicine on him, he couldn't use it all the time, otherwise it would cause his body to overexert itself. He fought hard in the heavy rain and dark star cluster, and even his well-trained body was exhausted from constantly swinging his sword. His hands felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds, and he could hardly hold the two long swords. Once the effects of the stimulants wore off, the sour and heavy feeling made his arms and legs feel as if they were filled with lead. Puff, puff, puff. The bullets hit his combat suit with a heavy sound, like drum beats on Li Changgong's body. His heart sank, and the long swords in his hands were finally unable to block all the bullets. Li Changgong hesitated. He knew he had reached his limit. His inner hesitation slowed down the speed of his sword. The bullets hitting him became more and more frequent. Am I really going to lose? Li Changgong felt a chill run through his body. For the first time in his life, he felt tremendous fear. It was the regret and shame of having his dignity completely destroyed and being beaten badly. Thinking back to how he had repeatedly forced Zhang Yi into a duel with his imposing presence, he wanted to find a crack in the ground and crawl into it. But Zhang Yi would not show him any mercy. He would take advantage of his weakness and finish him off. More large-caliber cannons began to fire at Li Changgong. If this thing hit him, even the best combat suit would be blown to pieces in no time. Jiang Han looked anxious. "Commander Qin, hurry up and stop them." Qin Shigong said slowly, "But the outcome hasn't been decided yet. Unless Gochen admits defeat himself." Upon hearing this, Jiang Han immediately used her communication device to send a message to Li Changgong. "Brother, admit defeat. Don't fight anymore." Li Changgong was already desperate, but Jiang Han's words were like salt rubbed into his wounds, causing him intense pain. Jiang Han was his childhood sweetheart, and he had admired her since he was a child. What had he said to Jiang Han back then? At that time, he was full of spirit and confident of victory when he told Jiang Han that he would teach Zhang Yi a lesson and avenge her and White Tiger. But now? Jiang Han had seen his ugly and miserable state. Li Changgong gritted his teeth and suddenly felt his throat tighten, unable to utter the 3 words, "I admit defeat." Zhang Yi had a mocking smile on the corner of his mouth, and the bullets rained down on Li Changgong without letting up, hitting him even harder. Just as Li Changgong was about to give up, Zhang Yi took the initiative to communicate with him. "Li Changgong, beg for mercy. As long as you beg for mercy and admit defeat, I won't bully you anymore. I hope you'll remember today's lesson and stop thinking you're so great. Without a good family background, you're nothing. Come on, admit defeat. Kneel down and say you were wrong. I really want to see the stubborn look on your face turn into one of submission." Zhang Yi's mockery made Li Changgong's eyes red. He raised his head and roared, "Zhang Yi! I'll kill you!" Whoosh! He charged forward again, ignoring the rain of bullets, now completely out of his mind and determined to fight Zhang Yi to the death. But all he got was an even more fierce attack from Zhang Yi. "You seem to have misunderstood something. You're not a character in a comic book. Anger won't make you stronger. How about a trip down memory lane? Maybe it'll boost your fighting power." Zhang Yi's mocking voice continued to ring in Li Changgong's ears. He combined his dual guns and aimed them at Li Changgong, who was soaring in the air. It's about time to end this. An incomparably powerful force emanated from Zhang Yi, a momentum that no one had ever felt from him before. This was the most powerful attack Zhang Yi could unleash at this moment. A huge vortex appeared behind him, and the power of the void spread out from it, as if a huge door to the abyss had opened in the sky. Infinite power gathered on Zhang Yi's body, like a huge undulating sea wave, spreading along his arms and then rushing into his 2 dark silver-white eagles. In the next moment, a huge dark battle spear emerged from the dual guns. Halberd of Doom. The moment the massive, dark war spear, over 10 meters long, appeared, everyone's expressions suddenly changed. The battle lasted for nearly half a day, but from start to finish, Zhang Yi had been using various tricks to dodge Li Changgong's attacks or delay him. This was the first time he had used such a powerful killing move. It's okay, any attack will be sliced by Big Brother's ability. No matter how powerful the ability is, it can't kill Big Brother. Jiang Han clenched her fists and said. But she didn't notice the deep smile on Zhang Yi's lips. The halberd of doom instantly appeared in front of Li Changgong. His eyes were bloodshot, and he swung his swords fiercely. My thoughts cut everything, and nothing could break them. The huge black battle spear was split in 2 right down the middle. But this time, it didn't fly away, but exploded with a loud bang as it passed by Li Changgong's sides. A huge black sphere suddenly appeared in midair, forming a sphere with a radius of 10 kilometers in an instant. Single attacks are useless against you, but you can't deal with a large area AoE attack, right? Zhang Yi said. He had only used a small trick to deceive Li Changgong. That was to release 2 halberds of doom at the same time, then pretend that there was only one. When they were close to Li Changgong, he let them split apart. This gave Li Changgong the illusion that he had split Zhang Yi's halberd of doom with a single sword strike. Big Brother! Jiang Han shouted excitedly. Qin Shigong held her shoulders and smiled at her, saying, Don't worry, Gochen will be fine. At some point, Shan Daowen had disappeared from where he was standing. Zhang Yi stared at Li Changgong, who had been hit, and whispered, With your ability, there's no way you could escape with an attack covering such a wide area. Li Changgong, you're not really dead, are you? Of course, Li Changgong wasn't dead. This was in Xinjiang, where many epsilons were watching the battle. They wouldn't allow the Huashu kingdom to lose one of its top fighters. What's more, the battle between Zhang Yi and Li Changgong was not the kind of extremely dangerous battle, but a long, drawn-out battle. This kind of battle could minimize the risk. In the void, the darkness dissipated. Li Changgong's body was suspended in midair, his combat suit was torn, and his helmet had exploded. He lay in midair, surrounded by a thick layer of blue light. Although he had not been killed by Zhang Yi, his eyes were unfocused. A strange look flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. No wonder Qin Qigong had said that someone would be sent to protect the two of them at the critical moment to avoid any deaths. So that was his trick. In the distance, Shang Daowen flew over like a shooting star and landed between Zhang Yi and Li Changgong. He exhaled a long breath. Mr. Chaos, we agreed not to kill them. You were too harsh. If I had been a little slower, Gochin might have been killed by you. It was you who had just saved Li Changgong's life. Zhang Yi glanced at Shang Daowen. This mythical being with the codename Xidagarba King appeared to be a user of telekinesis. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to quickly form a protective shield with his powerful telekinesis in such a short time and save Li Changgong's life. Far away in the Earth God's temple in Xinjiang, Manhua put away the wood carving in her hand. Zhang Yi's move seemed powerful, but he didn't really want to kill Li Changgong, so she didn't need to stop him. That was good, because if she had intervened, Zhang Yi would have been her target. Zhang Yi looked at Li Changgong, who had already collapsed, but continued to ask, "Is this battle over?" Li Changgong, do you admit defeat? Shang Daowen's eyebrows twitched interestingly, and he looked back at Li Changgong with a somewhat helpless expression. Need he say anything? He had already made his move. If it weren't for him, Li Changgong might have lost his life with that blow. But Zhang Yi deliberately said that to completely destroy Li Changgong's confidence. Li Changgong's eyes flashed with waves of emotion, then he slowly closed his eyes. Zhang Yi laughed loudly and said, "The Northwest King isn't pretending to be dead, is he? The son of a distinguished military family, the supreme commander of the Northwest region, can't fight, so he starts pretending to be dead." He shouted at the top of his lungs, using a megaphone, "My God! Are you counting on everyone having a bad memory and keeping their mouths shut, so they won't spread this around? No way, right?" The smart devices in the combat uniforms had a very effective amplification system, which was designed to facilitate the issuance of orders during combat. So when Zhang Yi shouted at the top of his lungs, his voice spread from the sky to the surrounding area, and everyone in the distance could hear it clearly. Li Changgong suddenly opened his eyes. "No, don't say that." Zhang Yi lowered his head and looked down at him, his expression the same as Li Changgong's when he first faced Zhang Yi. "Do you know you were wrong?" He elegantly turned the gun in his hand. "Or do you want to keep fighting?" Li Changgong's face was very ugly, and Shang Daowen also looked at him with an amused expression, as if to say, "Li Changgong, have some dignity. If you don't admit defeat, I won't save you again." Li Changgong's throat was hoarse, like a rusty tin can. He paused for nearly a minute before finally saying the word, his face red with humiliation. "I lost." After saying those words, it was as if something had been sucked out of Li Changgong's body with a syringe. His face quickly darkened, and his back was no longer as straight as it used to be. Qin Qigong, Han Shanzhua, Jian Han, and Pa Jigsan all clearly saw the unmistakable despair in this man's body. Zhang Yi didn't say anything else. This blow had allowed him to completely regain his reputation. Being defeated by someone he looked down on completely shattered Li Changgong's dignity. Zhang Yi took half a step back and disappeared from where he stood, then flew toward Xinjiang City. Shang Daowen looked at Li Changgong and smiled reassuringly, "Your Excellency Gochin, a momentary victory or defeat doesn't mean anything. I hope you'll cheer up and learn from your mistake." Li Changgong closed his eyes and said, "Leave me alone for a while." Shang Daowen raised his eyebrows and said, "All right, I'll go back first." Shang Daowen left, and the telekinesis on Li Changgong disappeared. He fell freely from the air toward the ground. Before long, his body landed in muddy water filled with ice. He also had space power, so he wouldn't be killed by the fall. But he still let himself fall a little. The physical pain could ease the pain in his heart. He completely submerged himself in the muddy water. Beneath him was a huge pit that Zhang Yi had created, which had already been filled with muddy water. Li Changgong sank to the bottom of the muddy water. He was ashamed to face anyone. Zhang Yi came to Qin Shigong and the others. He glanced briefly at Jiang Han, whose eyes were very complicated, but he didn't say anything. In a world where strength was everything, Zhang Yi had even defeated Li Changgong, so from now on, no one had the right to say a single word against him. Zhang Yi flew back. After fighting a big battle, he was still in perfect condition, not only unscathed, but his spirit and energy were also unaffected. Qin Shigong and the others looked at him. At this moment, everyone's gaze toward Zhang Yi had changed significantly. In the past, they thought that although Zhang Yi was powerful, he was still a small fry from a lowly background, so his potential was not necessarily that high. When faced with someone like Li Changgong, a soldier born into a military family, he would surely be crushed. But today, they watched with their own eyes as Zhang Yi defeated Li Changgong with his own hands. There were no fancy moves, just pure strength. The strong always earn everyone's respect, and Zhang Yi was no exception. Qin Shigong took a deep breath and said with emotion, "He truly lives up to the name of the Jiangnan region's absolute defense. His strength is awe-inspiring." Shang Daowen muttered in a low voice, "Chaos, chaos." Chaos is hazy and unknown, making his true nature difficult to see. He truly lives up to his name. Anyone who dares to underestimate him will surely suffer greatly. Shang Daowen's words made everyone nod in agreement. Zhang Yi was too good at hiding his true strength. In fact, the upper echelons of all the major regions had heard stories about him. They knew how he had fought every battle, seemingly turning the tide against all odds and winning with ease, while others looked on in disbelief. Such a person commanded everyone's respect. Everyone thought to themselves, never go against this person in the future, because you never know how many cards he has up his sleeve. Zhang Yi was too good at hiding his true self. It was impossible to gauge his depth, but when he occasionally showed a glimpse of his sharpness, it made people respect him even more. Zhang Yi smiled and said to everyone, "I was lucky to win on a technicality. I hope you all don't laugh at me." He was being modest, but no one dared to think that way. Han Shanzhua hugged his arms and nodded as he said, "Young man, you are really talented. This time, I am truly impressed by you." He gave Zhang Yi a thumbs up, looking completely convinced. In fact, Han Shanzhua didn't like the arrogant Li Changgong either, so when he saw Li Changgong get beaten up by Zhang Yi, he was secretly delighted. Zhang Yi smiled and said, "It was just luck. I'm a little tired and want to go back and rest." Qin Shigong hurriedly said, "That's natural." He immediately asked Shang Daowen to arrange a car to send Zhang Yi back. Qin Shigong was extremely happy at that moment. The stronger Zhang Yi was, the greater their chances of successfully exterminating the Earth Centipede clan in the Qinling Mountains. Add to that Li Changgong, although he had lost to Zhang Yi, he had also demonstrated sufficient strength. If Han Shanzhua also agreed to go and cooperate with Zongyue, the town guard envoy of Ghost Valley, then the 4 powerful Epsilon-class warriors should be able to take down the Earth Centipede clan with ease. 4 powerful Epsilon-level chariot warriors should be able to take them down easily. In the crowd, Pa Jigsaw stood silently with his hands behind his back. His gaze followed Zhang Yi, his small eyes slowly narrowing, occasionally flashing with a mysterious light. His fat face was slightly upturned at the corners, along with his well-groomed mustache. "Chaos, Zhang Yi." He muttered silently in a voice only he could hear. "This is a rare treasure." Just as Zhang Yi was about to leave, a sudden cry rang out in everyone's ears. "Wait! Everyone, please don't leave!" Everyone was startled by the voice and turned to see Li Changgong rushing over from a distance. Everyone looked at each other with strange expressions. Wasn't this guy just acting depressed because he lost to Zhang Yi? He buried himself in mud and water, wishing he would never see anyone again. How did he recover so quickly? Li Changgong was back. He was indeed very emotional. After all, he had boasted earlier, only to be slapped in the face by Zhang Yi. Now he wanted to find a crack in the ground and crawl into it. He even wanted to leave without saying goodbye and return to the northwest region with his men. However, after burying himself in ice water for 5 minutes, he finally realized that running away was not the answer. He was now the commander-in-chief of the northwest region. If word got out that he had lost to Zhang Yi in this battle, not only would his reputation be damaged, but even his rule in the northwest region would be affected. He had just risen to power, and the situation below was unstable. He had not yet completely grasped everything. It was very likely that someone would use this incident to stir up trouble. Therefore, he endured the humiliation in his heart and chose to return and appear before everyone. Li Changgong flew in front of everyone and landed. Facing their strange and undisguised gazes, he slowly opened his veil. Qin Shigong asked with concern, "My dear nephew, are you all right?" The corner of Li Changgong's eye twitched, while Zhang Yi looked at him with indifference. Although Zhang Yi didn't say a word, his cold and even somewhat dismissive expression once again hurt Li Changgong. Li Changgong couldn't help but grit his teeth and try hard to suppress the urge to run away immediately. "Everyone, please wait a moment. There's something I forgot to tell you." Everyone looked at Li Changgong curiously, wondering what he was going to say. Li Changgong took a deep breath and said to everyone, "We came here from the northwest region and brought gifts for everyone. Please don't refuse them." As soon as Li Changgong opened his mouth, he was going to give each group a large amount of supplies worth 100 million yuan before the end of the world. This move was worth 500 million yuan. Hearing this, everyone immediately understood what Li Changgong was planning to do. These supplies were actually hush money, asking everyone present today to keep this battle a strict secret and not spread the news of its outcome. From the beginning, Qin Shigong had strictly limited the number of people who could watch the battle. Only representatives from the major regions were present. He was very cautious and worried that information about the battle and the two people would be leaked. So, after thinking about it, Li Changgong decided to pay them off. Han Shanzhua laughed happily and said, "I have no objections. Brother, you are too kind. I'll give you this favor." Pa Jigsan smiled and didn't rush to answer, but looked at the others instead. Jiang Han nodded and said, "I will also keep everything that happens here today strictly confidential." Qin Shigong still needed Li Changgong's help, so he naturally nodded in agreement. In the end, it all depended on Zhang Yi's attitude. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows and asked meaningfully, "Then what kind of outcome do you want? To tell everyone that you won?" Li Changgong's face turned a little red. He wasn't a shameless person and couldn't say such a thing. "It's not that much. Just don't say anything. I, Go Chen, will remember your kindness." Li Changgong wanted the outside world to think that the two of them had fought to a draw. That way, he wouldn't lose face. Saying such things in front of everyone was a huge blow to his pride. After all, everyone saw the outcome of the fight with their own eyes. However, for the sake of his own future, he had to do it. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes and waited a moment before slowly saying, "Others are just witnesses, but I am a participant. So this time, I want 3 times as much. Including the appearance fee for letting me fight, you owe me 600 million in supplies." That was 600 million worth of supplies before the end of the world, enough to fill a large warehouse. Moreover, these supplies were different from the supermarket supplies that Zhang Yi had collected. What Li Changgong gave him had to be daily necessities. For example, food, energy, materials, weapons, and so on. Therefore, when calculated this way, the value was much higher. Li Changgong gritted his teeth and nodded in agreement. Zhang Yi immediately smiled, "Brotherly, rest assured, I, Zhang Yi, love making friends. I am determined to be friends with you. As for what we discussed today, only heaven and earth know, and only those present here know. It will never be spread around." Li Changgong's heart was bleeding. He didn't expect that this time, he would have to pay 1 billion yuan worth of goods in one go. Those goods were basically non-renewable resources, and with the current productivity of the Northwest region, it would be impossible to produce them in a short period of time. But for the sake of his face and status, he had to hand over those goods. Jiang Han walked over and said softly to Li Changgong, "Big brother, I don't want my share." Li Changgong took a deep breath and didn't say anything. Except for the two of them, everyone else present was very happy at that moment. Especially Qin Qigong, Pa Jigsan, and Han Shanzhua, whose faces were almost twisted with smiles. They had only come to watch the excitement and ended up getting a great profit for nothing. However, they did not credit this favor to Li Changgong, but to Zhang Yi, so they looked at Zhang Yi with even more friendly eyes. Qin Qigong said with a smile, "All under heaven are brothers, and harmony among the 5 continents is precious. You guys are now friends after fighting, so after today, let's forget about the past. Let's work together to protect the Huashu kingdom." Everyone laughed, and the scene was filled with joy. Only Li Changgong couldn't smile. Qin Qigong arranged for cars to take everyone back. As they were leaving, Li Changgong called out to Zhang Yi, "Chaos." Zhang Yi turned his head and looked at Li Changgong. "What?" Li Changgong's face was solemn. He took a deep breath, then said to Zhang Yi, "Don't call me by my name in the future." Zhang Yi snorted, "You're such a pretender." Code names were a military convention used to conceal one's identity when on a mission. However, at this point, there were only a handful of people in the Huashu Kingdom's Epsilon, so who didn't know who everyone else was? Li Changgong said to Zhang Yi, "Names are dangerous things, so you should be careful." When Zhang Yi heard this, his heart suddenly began to beat faster. Li Changgong's expression was serious. He didn't seem to be joking or looking for trouble. It was more like a subtle warning. Zhang Yi was silent for a moment, then replied, "Okay, I'll remember that. Go Chen." Li Changgong nodded, his face calm, and left with Jiang Han. Tonight's meeting also ended temporarily because of the battle between Zhang Yi and Li Changgong. However, Qin Qigong had already said everything he wanted to say. He asked the representatives of the major regions to go back and think about it carefully, then give him an answer within a week. Li Changgong's side would basically agree. He now needed to do something to solidify his position. Having just lost to Zhang Yi, participating in the operation in the Qinling Mountains and obtaining a share of the yuan ore was particularly important to him. However, apart from him, no one else was in a hurry to make a decision. Zhang Yi thought to himself. In fact, going underground was not a big deal for him. His ability to survive was his top priority, and even in the dangerous underground, he could easily escape. Moreover, according to the information provided by the Xinjiang region, the 2 Epsilon-level Earth Centipede King and Queen were only at the White Chariot level with a strength of 10,000+. However, he did not rush to give an answer. Instead, he planned to think it over carefully before responding. After all, it wasn't a deal that needed to be made right away, and there was still plenty of time. He could take advantage of this time to take his companions from the shelter on a tour of Xinjiang. Zhang Yi and the others returned to the Ming imperial city of Xinjiang. Deng Shintong and the others were waiting outside the conference hall, completely unaware that they had already left and engaged in a battle that lasted half a day. So at this point, it was already early morning of the next day, and it was pitch black outside, but no one had left. Instead, they were waiting in the side hall for news from Zhang Yi and the others. They just thought that the meeting was very important, so it was taking a long time. It was only after Zhang Yi and the others returned that they learned what had happened last night. Shou Qi, Yan Xia, and the others walked over, asking with concern, "Are you hurt?" Zhang Yi smiled, "Don't worry, I'm fine. He's the one who's in trouble." Hearing this, everyone knew that Zhang Yi had won. Everyone's faces were filled with smiles of relief. Deng Shintong looked stunned. He was the only one who didn't know Zhang Yi's current strength, so it was normal for him to look so shocked. However, when Zhang Yi's gaze swept over them, he didn't see Fatty Su. He asked curiously, "Where's Fatty Su?" Everyone's faces were filled with amused smiles. Lu Karen replied, Brother Chun Lei went out with the female housekeeper who is responsible for assisting us. Zhang Yi's expression became very subtle. He couldn't help but think of something. At this moment, Fatty Su seemed to have received news of Zhang Yi's return and walked back from outside the door. As soon as he entered the door, everyone looked at him. Fatty Su scratched his head in confusion. Why are you all looking at me like that? Is there something on my face? Behind him, the butler Li Yangyang walked over with a smile and bowed respectfully. Everyone, it's getting late. Would you like to return to the manor to rest? Or perhaps you need to bathe or eat? If you do, I'll have someone prepare it right away. Zhang Yi looked at Fatty Su, then at the tall and beautiful Li Yangyang, his eyes filled with a strange look. Let's go back first. There were some things that couldn't be said here. So Zhang Yi led everyone back to the manor where they were staying in the early hours of the morning. Li Yangyang withdrew and had people prepare the services they needed. Only Zhang Yi and the others from the Jiangnan region remained in the room. As soon as the outsiders left, Deng Shintong couldn't wait to ask, Old Zhang, did you beat Li Changgong? Zhang Yi drank some warm tea and slowly nodded. Deng Shintong was speechless for a long time. Sure enough, you're still as mysterious as ever. No one can see through your true strength. Yang Xinxin sat on the sofa not far from Zhang Yi, holding an exquisite teacup in her hand. While drinking tea, she asked Zhang Yi, Brother, are you planning to go to the Qinling Mountains? Zhang Yi smiled slightly and asked, Do you think I should go? Yang Xinxin nodded without hesitation. The Xinjiang region has no reason to harm my brother. According to them, the town guard envoy of Ghost Valley is still alive, which means that the threat underground is not as terrifying as imagined. And according to the current situation, it is clearly impossible for the East Sea region to participate in the operation. Li Changgong will definitely participate in order to save face. As for the Southwest region, Yang Xinxin smiled and shook her head. From the people they sent, it's clear that they have no intention of participating. They're just going through the motions. However, at the moment, Xinjiang at least has Jin Yuanzi and Gochen who can be dispatched. The northeast regions, Godluya is still uncertain, but even so, if you step in, brother, the three epsilons will act together. This operation has a high probability of success. Zhang Yi nodded, I think so too. Besides, I have a lot of doubts about that secret underground realm. He thought of the black-armored person in Mist Valley and the Sky Dragon King, who was worse off than dead after being transformed. There were also the last words of the Sky Dragon King before he died. A strong sense of crisis enveloped Zhang Yi. Although he didn't know when that crisis would come, when faced with the fear of the unknown, the only way to feel safe was to continuously improve his strength. If he obtained the Yuan ore, Zhang Yi would be able to greatly improve the defense level of the entire sanctuary. This deal still had a lot of potential for profit, so it was worth doing. I'll think about it carefully, but I need to observe the other districts' movements more closely. If there are no problems, I can make the trip. As Zhang Yi spoke, Zhou Qir placed one of his arms in front of her, her hands emitting a bright white light as she checked his body. This was to prevent him from suffering hidden injuries during his battle with Li Changgong. Zhang Yi looked at her, then glanced at Yang Xinxin, Yang Xia, and the others. He smiled slightly and said, There's nothing much to do in the next few days, so we can take a look around Xinjiang. Right, there's one more thing. Old Deng, I need you to help me arrange something. Zhang Yi looked at Deng Shintong. The Deng family had deep roots in the Huashu kingdom and extensive connections in Xinjiang. Deng Shintong sat up straight and said, Just tell me what you need. He would be more than happy to help Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi smiled and said, Find a way to help me check if anyone has any relatives still alive in Xinjiang. It would be best to communicate with people from other regions as well. If you find any relatives who are still alive, you can send them to Tianhai City. After hearing Zhang Yi's words, the expressions of everyone present immediately became complicated. Uncle Yu sighed deeply and shook his head. His hometown was in a small village in the north. As a bachelor who had been working away from home for many years, he had no close relatives left. Now, Zhang Yi was his family. Not to mention Fatty Sue, who had been glued to his game console since he returned. After listening to Zhang Yi's words, he felt relieved and let out a sigh of relief. It's a good thing that everyone in my village is dead. Then he lowered his head and continued playing his game. However, Yang Xinxin and the other women felt differently. The Yang and Zhou families had once been well-off families. Lu Karen didn't come from a high-class family, but her parents were high-level intellectuals. After the apocalypse, the probability of their closest relatives surviving was higher than that of ordinary people. It was impossible for them to say that they didn't want to look for them. It's just that, they also had some concerns in their hearts. If they found their families, would they continue to live with Zhang Yi, or would they accompany their families? Yang Xinxin's expression was the most calm. She took a sip of coffee from her cup and said lightly, I have no relatives to look for. Her father had died of illness in his early years, and her mother had remarried abroad and rarely kept in touch. If not for that, she wouldn't have been entrusted to Yang Xia to be taken care of and sent to Tianqin College, a private school for the elite. So when Zhang Yi asked her the question, she was completely unmoved and refused directly. But not everyone was as carefree as her. After the apocalypse, they often hoped that their families were still alive. Zhou Haimei clasped her hands slightly in front of her knees. She thought for a moment, then said, Then I'll trouble Mr. Deng. I actually have an older brother who was doing business in Xinjiang, but I don't know if he's still alive. Zhou Ke glanced uneasily at Zhang Yi, hugged his arm tightly, and said, I don't know what happened to my parents. If you can find them, can you arrange a place for them to live in Tianhai City? As for me, I will never leave your side. Yang Xia also said, I feel the same way. Lu Karen said, Brother Zhang Yi, I feel the same way too. Their expressions were a little strange, as if they were afraid that Zhang Yi would be unhappy. Zhang Yi couldn't help but laugh. This is a good thing. Why do you all look like that? If they are your closest relatives, you can bring them with you. Tianhai City can support them now. Zhang Yi himself was all alone. Although he had relatives after his parents passed away, he didn't have much contact with them. But he knew that everyone needed family, and he wouldn't deprive his friends of that right. Old Deng, go make the arrangements. Deng Shintong said, No problem. Although Xinjiang was also affected by the disaster, the impact should be minimal. After all, it's the capital, so it has all kinds of emergency measures in place. I can look for them. Maybe your families are still there. But you must be prepared. Deng Shintong spread his hands. I'll say it straight. Whether your families are rich or poor, they are all ordinary families after the apocalypse. You all know what it's like during the disaster. Everyone nodded. They were prepared for this and weren't going to be overly sensitive. They just wanted Deng Shintong to look for them so they could put their minds at ease. They left it to Deng Shintong to make the arrangements. After everyone had been taken care of, Zhang Yi walked over to Fatty Sue, who was sitting in the corner, and patted him on the shoulder. Fatty Sue finally took his eyes off the screen and looked at Zhang Yi. Boss? Zhang Yi said with a smile, Let's talk about you and that girl. Zhang Yi had long noticed that something was wrong between that woman and Fatty Sue. However, it was only their first day in Xinjiang, and Fatty Sue was already distracted. If this continued, who knew what would happen? Zhang Yi had to step in and take control. When Fatty Sue heard Zhang Yi's question, he knew it was about Li Yang. His old face turned red, which was rare for him, and he scratched the back of his head and laughed foolishly. Boss, you noticed? Zhang Yi rolled his eyes. I'm not blind. Even a dog passing by could see that lewd smile on your big face. Fatty Sue's face turned red with excitement. He looked seriously at Zhang Yi and said word by word, Boss, I think I'm in love. Zhang Yi was speechless. Zhang Yi stood frozen in place for at least 10 seconds. He opened his mouth, trying to say something, but after thinking about it for a long time, his brain couldn't come up with the right words. After a long time, he said with difficulty, Didn't you say that you no longer believed in love? Fatty Sue explained, The past is the past, and now is now. At that time, I hadn't met a woman who was right for me, but now. His eyes were bright and filled with the sour smell of love. "I've found the person who is destined for me." He put his hands together and said with a face full of devotion and happiness, "I always thought that I would only meet a girl like that when playing a gal game. But I never thought that I would meet her in real life. Boss, this time I won't let her get away." Zhang Yi frowned and looked at the fat man in front of him with some disgust. "I can tell you're really hungry. The delusions of fat nerds are the scariest. Fatty, what could anyone possibly like about you? Do they like that you're fat, or that you love going to Blizzard City to get your feet massaged?" Fatty Sue was so scared that he quickly stood up and put his index finger to his lips. "Shoo, boss, let's not talk about the past. This time, I've really found true love. You have to support me." Zhang Yi took a deep breath. "Don't you look in the mirror every day? She's beautiful, many people drool when they see her." His hands fell from in front of Fatty Sue to his feet. "With your appearance, how dare you say such things?" Fatty Sue's expression dimmed for a moment, but quickly, he clenched his fists and his gaze became determined. "Boss, this is love. Zhang Yi, I love your mother's twisted love. You idiot, it's obvious that that woman is after me. Can't you understand something so simple?" Fatty Sue's body stiffened, then he looked at Zhang Yi with disbelief. "Boss, you already have so many beautiful women around you, why are you fighting with me over her?" Zhang Yi took a few deep breaths and forced himself to resist the urge to hit him. "I mean, her purpose in approaching you is to get information about all of us from you. You didn't say anything you shouldn't, did you?" Zhang Yi's gaze became serious. Fatty Sue swallowed hard because when Zhang Yi was serious, he always had an aura that made him feel fear and awe. He also knew that he mustn't joke around with Zhang Yi at a time like this. Fatty Sue shook his head vigorously. "Boss, no. She didn't ask a single word about you." Zhang Yi said indifferently, "You've only known her for a day, and you already love her to death. Once you're hooked, she'll ask you anything, and you'll be willing to take off your underwear and show her. Fatty, I'm a good person to those around me, right?" Fatty Sue thought to himself, if she wanted me to take off my underwear, I'd beg her to let me. "Boss, you're really good to us, I know that." Zhang Yi nodded, "Yeah, it's good that you know that. But this kind of kindness comes with conditions. I'm only good to my own people." He didn't say much else, just patted Fatty Sue on the shoulder and whispered in his ear, "If you reveal any information about me or us to outsiders, then for the sake of our past friendship, I'll send you to Chaoyu Base to peddle an electric generator." Fatty Sue's whole body shivered. Although he had never peddled an electric generator, he had seen the conditions of the 3 major bases with his own eyes. Although everyone in the shelter had food and clothing and lived a comfortable life, in the 3 major bases in Tianhai City, people were barely surviving. The grassroots people worked almost all day long, except for eating and sleeping, living like animals, just existing for the sake of living. That kind of life was worse than death for Fatty Sue. "Boss, rest assured, I won't say a word to her." Fatty Sue immediately stood at attention and shouted at the top of his lungs. Zhang Yi smiled slightly. "I'm not looking at what you say, I'm looking at what you do." He patted Fatty Sue's fat face and told him to get lost. In Zhang Yi's heart, he had already decided that the woman named Liang Yang was very suspicious. However, there was one thing he couldn't figure out. Liang Yang belonged to the Dragon Guardians of Xinjiang, which was a very elite military unit. As their butler, Liang Yang should be a very professional person. Even if she wanted to go undercover to gather information, she wouldn't do it in such an obvious way. Even if she wanted to use her beauty to seduce someone, she should have come straight to Zhang Yi. Seducing Fatty Sue was too obvious. Could it be that she knows I'm a gentleman and is afraid that she's not attractive enough? Zhang Yi rubbed his chin, feeling that there must be something strange behind this. He would first give Fatty Sue a warning, then see what that woman was up to. As for whether Liang Yang really liked Fatty Sue, well, that could be a contender for the funniest joke of the year. Unless there was something wrong with her eyes, there was absolutely no way that could be true. When Li Changgong returned, his subordinates, the 5 extreme gods of war, immediately came to greet him. Li Changgong stood with his hands behind his back, a proud expression on his face, not saying a word, but giving off an air of arrogance. Seeing this, his subordinates were a little confused as to how Li Changgong had performed in the battle. When they returned to their lodgings, the Sky War God walked over and complimented him. "Commander, I'm sure you taught that ignorant Chaos a lesson he'll never forget, right?" Li Changgong leaned back in his chair, his expression dignified without anger, and said indifferently, "I guess so." His subordinates were a little confused. "I guess so. Did he win or not?" Li Changgong laughed coldly, took a sip of tea without haste, and then said, "I didn't expect Chaos to be so strong. His code name is Absolute Defense, and when he fought me, he basically only defended and never attacked, just running away. He refused to fight me head-on. There was no point in continuing like this, so I had no choice but to call it quits." Li Changgong's words made his subordinates flatter him, and then they criticized Zhang Yi's fighting style. "He didn't dare to fight head-on, what kind of skilled fighter is he? And he's supposed to be the strongest fighter in the Jiangnan region? But he was able to escape from our commander, so he must have some strength." Li Changgong frowned slightly. "It's a pity, I underestimated Chaos. I fell for his trick." The Earth War God standing nearby hurriedly asked, "Commander, what did he do?" Li Changgong let out a bitter laugh and shook his head. "He hid his strength and then made a bet with me. I thought victory was assured, but I didn't expect him to trick me. This time, I have to pay him a lot of supplies as a bet." Everyone was fine with this. Paying some supplies was not a big deal for the Northwest region. The entire Northwest region was Li Changgong's domain, so he could give it to whomever he wanted. Li Changgong asked the Mortal War God to coordinate and ordered the Northwest region's military supply department to immediately transport a large amount of supplies to Xinjiang. The 5 extreme gods of war naturally didn't dare to say anything. However, this time there were still some losses, which would damage Li Changgong's reputation to some extent. The South Pole War God said worriedly, "I'm afraid that some people in the region will be dissatisfied and spread rumors behind the scenes." Li Changgong scoffed dismissively, leaning back in his sofa chair with his legs crossed. "They're just a bunch of petty thieves. What's there to be afraid of?" But, his eyes turned cold, "Someone in the regional headquarters must have betrayed me." He wasn't stupid. After experiencing this battle, losing was natural, but he would also look back on it. Upon careful consideration, one could see that apart from seeming a little hasty at the beginning, Zhang Yi didn't suffer any disadvantages, and everything he did afterwards was as if he had anticipated Li Changgong's abilities. This was not at all like someone who was unprepared. Not many people knew about Li Changgong's abilities, and few people in other regions knew his exact abilities. Only some people in the Northwest region had seen him in action. "When everything here is over, I will definitely conduct a thorough investigation. I will get rid of those who are secretly working against me." The Sky War God's name was Qinling Arc. Upon hearing this, she immediately smiled knowingly and said, "Commander, I have an idea. Can I tell you?" Li Changgong glanced at her. Qinling Arc was his most trusted confidant. Not only was she exceptionally skilled in martial arts, but she was also very capable and could be considered Li Changgong's strategist. "Oh? What's your idea? Feel free to speak." A deep smile appeared on the corner of the Sky War God's mouth, and her eyes were also smiling, but they were completely cold, making people feel somewhat apprehensive. "Chaos used tricks in this battle and barely fought you to a draw. If you meet on the battlefield, he will definitely not be your match. Why don't we send back a message saying that you defeated Chaos, the strongest mutant in the Jiangnan region? This will intimidate those petty people. The supplies that were transported can be explained as necessary for the Qinling Mountain operation. As long as the matter in Qinling Mountain is resolved and we obtain that 10% of the yuan or, all problems will be solved." Li Changgong frowned. "Is that really okay?" Although he said this, he was very satisfied inside. The Sky War God was indeed his right-hand person, completely expressing his inner thoughts. Although he had lost to Zhang Yi, on the surface, he still had to declare victory within the Northwest region. Moreover, this news was spread in an unofficial manner. As long as enough people talked about it, it would become the common understanding of everyone in the northwest region. Even if Zhang Yi or people from other regions discovered it one day, he could just say that it was a rumor and that he, Li Changgong, had never said it himself. The Sky War God nodded and said, "It's all for the stability of the region. It's necessary. Besides, isn't it only natural that you would defeat chaos? Zhang Yi is completely shooting himself in the foot by opposing you." After the Sky War God finished speaking, Li Changgong lowered his head, a hint of helplessness flashing in his eyes. Others might not know what was going on, but she had already guessed most of it. How proud was Li Changgong? When he first arrived in Blizzard City, he used his power to intimidate others and went directly to Zhang Yi's door to challenge him to a fight. If he had won this time, he definitely wouldn't be so quiet now. Add to that his request to have the so-called bet delivered, and it was easy to see what was going on. However, even if Li Changgong really lost, he couldn't afford to lose. He had to win, and win big. He had to let everyone in the Northwest region know that the commander they trusted was a child of heaven, or even a god in the end times. A few days later, the supplies from the Northwest region were delivered. Those supplies were divided among the major regions, with Zhang Yi naturally getting the most. His dimensional space now contained a large amount of supplies. Nowadays, the consumption of supplies at home was increasing. After all, for mutants, converting food into energy was the most important way to survive. Even so, Zhang Yi's large supply reserves meant that everyone still didn't have to worry about food. In Xingjing City, Liang Yang acted as a guide and led Zhang Yi and the others around. The city was much quieter than Blizzard City because the climate was colder in the northern country. Only Zhang Yi and his group could enjoy the highest level of combat suits, which allowed them to move freely in extremely low temperatures of -70 to 80 degrees Celsius. Liang Yang led everyone to a huge ancient well. She smiled and said, "This is the Dragon Chamber Well. It is said that it was built by the demon monk Yao Guangxiao during the reign of the Ming dynasty's Emperor Zhu Di. 2 dragons are locked inside." The ground around the Dragon Chamber Well was clear of snow and ice. This was not even possible in Blizzard City, because snowplows operated normally every day and required a lot of energy. Yuan, Oregon. This name popped into Zhang Yi's mind, and he suddenly realized why Yang Xinxin had insisted on letting him participate in this operation. If he could really get a share of that 10% of the Yuan ore, he might even be able to rebuild Tianhai City. He couldn't help but think of the once bustling metropolis, and Zhang Yi couldn't help but feel a little emotional. It turned out that the end of the world had only come a little over a year ago. But why did he feel as if a century had passed? Things change, people change, that's probably how it is. Liang Yang was already there, smiling and introducing everyone. The common people of Xingjing come here during festivals and throw coins into the well to pray for good luck. It's said to bring good luck. Upon hearing this, the girls and the family's eyes lit up. Zhang Yi didn't really understand this, but women seemed to be very fond of these kinds of things, except for Yang Xinxin. However, the first person to run over was Fatty Su. He raised his right hand and said, "I'll go first." Hee. Zhang Yi looked at Fatty Su, whose face was flushed with happiness and whose eyes were much brighter than usual. He didn't know if it was just his imagination, but Zhang Yi even thought that this fat nerd had become a little more handsome recently. At least he knew to wash his face with facial cleanser every day after getting up. "Is this the power of love?" Zhang Yi said lightly. He looked at the smiling Liang Yang and raised his eyebrows. What the hell was this person up to? Fatty Su didn't have any coins either. He walked up to Liang Yang and scratched his head stupidly. I don't have any coins. Can I throw something else?" Liang Yang smiled slightly and said, "No one has any coins. Just throw whatever you want. It's just a token of your good wishes and for good luck." Fatty Su took half a packet of cookies out of his pocket and threw them into the well. He lowered his head and stole a glance at Liang Yang, then clasped his hands together and began to make a wish. Soon, the women in the house lined up with smiles on their faces, threw some small trinkets they had with them into the well, and made wishes. I hope the apocalypse ends soon so that everyone can return to their normal lives. I hope we can always be safe and sound. I hope there will be world peace.